The first howl was swallowed by the storm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the darkened streets for a fleeting second. Then came the second cry, low, desperate, filled with urgency. Through the pounding rain, a lone figure moved. The retired German shepherd limped forward, soaked to the bone, her swollen belly weighing her down. Every step sent pain lancing through her body, but she pushed on, ignoring the sharp contractions gripping her sides. She had no time. She knew where she had to go. Up ahead, the old police station stood like a beacon in the night, its warm lights flickering through the rain. The place she had once called home. The only place she trusted. And she needed to get there before it was too late. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but instinct drove her forward. The cold pavement pressed against her tired paws, her breaths coming in shallow, ragged pants. She had spent years on these streets, chasing criminals, standing beside her handler, protecting the officers who had been her pack. They had called her Shadow, a name whispered with both respect and love. But retirement had taken her away from the station, away from the only life she had ever known. Until now. A sharp pain coiled through her abdomen, forcing her to stop. She lowered her head, blinking against the rain as her body tensed. Another contraction hit, stronger than the last. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she refused to collapse. Not yet. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the city, masking the faint echoes of voices, human voices. Her ears twitched, searching through the noise. The police station was close now, the familiar scent of leather boots, oil, and metal cutting through the storm. She whined low in her throat. Almost there. A car sped past, spraying water across the sidewalk, but she didn't flinch. Pain clawed through her again, nearly stealing her breath. Her body urged her to stop, to curl up in some quiet, dark place. But that wasn't an option. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for them. The station's front steps came into view, glowing under the yellow streetlights. The doors stood shut, the warmth inside just out of reach. She had never needed permission to enter before. This was home. With the last of her strength, Shadow staggered up the stairs. The pain came in waves now, fast and relentless. Her legs buckled, but she forced herself forward, pressing her soaked muzzle against the glass. Inside, an officer glanced up. At first he didn't react. Just another stormy night. Just another shadow outside. Then he saw her. The moment their eyes met, his chair scraped back. Oh my God, Shadow? The doors burst open. Officer Daniels, her old handler, dropped to his knees beside her, hands trembling as he reached for her. His uniform was crisp, but his face was stricken with shock. He hadn't seen her in months. She let out a weak whimper, pressing her head against his chest. Then, as another sharp contraction tore through her, she collapsed into his arms. And everything went black. The moment Shadow collapsed, chaos erupted. Get her inside, now? Officer Daniels' voice cut through the storm. Two officers rushed forward, their boots slamming against the wet pavement as they helped lift the motionless German shepherd into the station. Rain dripped from her soaked fur, pooling onto the polished floor as they laid her gently onto a warm blanket. Somebody get a vet on the line? Daniels knelt beside her, his pulse hammering. Shadow's breathing was rapid and shallow, her body trembling as another sharp contraction rippled through her. His fingers traced the scars on her side, old wounds from the years she had spent by his side, protecting him, shielding him from danger. Now she was the one in need. But why had she come here? Why now? The officers rally. The station buzzed with tension. Officers who had once worked alongside Shadow gathered around, their faces etched with concern. Some had seen her chase down suspects, sniff out narcotics and stand firm in the face of danger. Now the warrior lay broken before them, fighting a different battle. She's pregnant, Officer Riley whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She came back because she knew she needed help. A heavy silence settled over the room. The realization hit them all at once. She had chosen them. Of all the places in the world, of all the quiet, hidden corners she could have crawled into, she had fought through the storm, through the pain, just to get here. She still trusted them. Daniels swallowed hard, wiping the rain from his face. We're not letting her down. He grabbed his phone, dialing the emergency vet clinic. We need help. Now. A race against time. Shadow whimpered softly, her ears twitching at the sound of Daniel's voice. She could barely move now, exhaustion threatening to drag her under. But deep inside, instinct still burned. Her pups were coming. And she had to survive for them. A fresh wave of pain tore through her, and she let out a weak, broken cry. Daniels clenched his fists. The vet was still 15 minutes away. They didn't have 15 minutes. "We need to do this ourselves," Officer Jensen muttered. Daniels hesitated. None of them were veterinarians. They had faced gunfire, high-speed chases, and life-or-death situations. But this was different. But there was no time to doubt. Shadow's body tensed again, and then the first tiny whimper filled the air. The first pup is born. The room held its breath. A tiny, damp pup wriggled weakly on the blanket. Small, fragile, but alive. Shadow forced herself to move, instinct guiding her. She nosed the newborn gently, licking away the membrane, cleaning it, warming it. Tears stung Daniel's eyes. He had seen this dog chase down criminals with relentless force. He had watched her leap in front of him during a shootout, taking a bullet that could have ended his life. Now he watched her become a mother. And she wasn't done yet. The storm rages on. Minutes passed like hours. Another contraction. Another pup. Then another. One by one, tiny cries filled the station, a chorus of new life against the backdrop of rain pounding the windows. Officers who had once drawn their weapons beside Shadow now knelt in awe, whispering encouragement, their hands trembling as they helped dry the newborns. 5, 6, 7. The pile of tiny, squirming bodies grew, their fur still damp but their cries strong. Shadow was exhausted, her breaths ragged. But she kept going. She had fought for this moment. The moment the last pup entered the world, had won. Shadow let out a soft whimper and went still. The room froze. Daniel's heart pounded as he leaned in, pressing a shaking hand against her side. Her breathing was faint, too faint. "Shadow?" His voice cracked. The officers who had once fought beside her stood in stunned silence. They had seen her outrun criminals, take down threats twice her size, and survive wounds that would have killed lesser dogs. But now, after giving everything to bring her pups into the world, she was slipping away. "No, no, no," Daniels muttered, his hands moving to her head, gently stroking between her ears. "Stay with me, girl." The pups squirmed beside her, their tiny bodies blindly searching for warmth, for the mother they had only just met. The sight of them sent a dagger through Daniel's chest. Shadow had never given up on him. He wasn't about to give up on her. A desperate fight. "We're losing her," Officer Jensen whispered. Daniels wasn't listening. His hands moved instinctively, rubbing warmth into Shadow's body, urging her to keep breathing. The vet was still minutes away. They didn't have minutes. "Somebody get warm towels, now," he barked, snapping officers out of their daze. Within seconds they sprang into action. Thick blankets, fresh from the station's dryers, were wrapped around Shadow. Officer Riley grabbed a space heater from the break room, cranking it up beside her. Daniels lifted one of the newborns and gently pressed it against her nose. "Come on, Shadow," he whispered. "They need you." For a long moment nothing happened. Then, a breath. It was weak but it was there. A second later, a twitch in her paw. Daniels felt the tension in his chest loosen just a fraction. She was still in the fight. The vet arrives. Sirens blared outside. The front doors burst open as Dr. Ramirez, the station's emergency vet, rushed in. "What's her status?" she demanded, kneeling beside Shadow in an instant. "She almost stopped breathing," Daniels said, his voice thick with emotion. "She just delivered 7 pups. She fought so hard." Dr. Ramirez's hands moved quickly, checking Shadow's vitals. The room was silent, the officers watching her every move like their lives depended on it. Then finally, "She's weak but she's stable." A wave of relief crashed through the station. "She needs fluids," Dr. Ramirez continued, pulling out supplies from her bag. "And rest. A lot of it. But she's going to make it." Daniels slumped back, exhaling a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Around him, the officers who had stood frozen in fear moments ago were now wiping their eyes, disguising their relief as quiet coughs. They had almost lost her. But Shadow had survived. Again. The moment that broke them. As the tension faded, something incredible happened. Shadow, still too weak to lift her head, opened her eyes. She looked at Daniels, the man she had spent years protecting, the partner she had once trusted with her life. And then, with the little strength she had left, she shifted her body just enough to pull her pups closer. She wasn't just a warrior anymore. She was a mother. And for the first time in their lives, the officers who had seen the worst of humanity, who had faced bullets and danger without hesitation, broke down in tears. Daniels wiped at his face, letting out a weak chuckle. "You really are unstoppable, aren't you?" Shadow let out a soft exhale, her eyes fluttering shut. This time when she rested, it wasn't because she was giving up. It was because she had finally won. The station was quiet now. The storm had passed, leaving only the distant hum of rainwater trickling down the streets outside. The once tense officers sat scattered around the room, their uniforms wrinkled, their faces exhausted but relieved. At the center of it all, Shadow lay curled in a warm nest of blankets, her breathing slow but steady. Her pups, 7 tiny bundles of fur, huddled close against her belly, their tiny whimpers filling the air. Daniel sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her head. She had survived. Again. And this time she wasn't alone. The second chance at family. Officer Riley knelt nearby, watching the pups with a soft smile. I still can't believe she came all this way just to have them here. Daniels chuckled, shaking his head. Of course she did. She never trusted anyone more than us. The room fell into a thoughtful silence. Shadow had spent years in this station, training, working, saving lives. But retirement had pulled her away, given her a quiet life outside the only family she had ever known. And when it mattered most, when she was vulnerable and alone, she had come back. Because this was home. And these men and women weren't just her handlers. They were her pack. Decisions that change everything. Dr. Ramirez checked Shadow's vitals again. She's strong, but she's going to need care. A lot of it. Daniels nodded. She won't be alone. Riley hesitated. And the pups. Daniels looked at them. The tiny creatures who had been born in the middle of a storm, in the middle of a police station filled with the people who had once relied on their mother to keep them safe. The same people who now owed her everything. His decision was made before Riley even finished the question. They stay. The room went still. Riley blinked. What? Daniels grinned. You heard me. We raised 1 legend in this station. Maybe it's time we raised 7 more. The silence lasted only a second before it was shattered by a round of laughter, cheers, and murmurs of agreement. It was crazy. It was unexpected. But it was right. A legacy lives on. As the officers settled into the reality of their new furry recruits, Shadow let out a soft sigh. Her body was still weak, but her heartbeat was steady. The pups squirmed against her warmth, blind and fragile, but alive. She had done it. She had made it back. And now, for the first time in a long time, she could rest. Daniels ran his fingers gently through her fur. You did good, girl. Shadow didn't open her eyes. She didn't have to. She was finally home. And her story wasn't over yet.